The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. Please be seated. It only just occurred to me in the midst of sitting and looking at the church all lit up that I had an amazing power that I was able to do. I got to extend Christmas. I'm not really supposed to do that, to be honest. Epiphany is January 6th. That is the day of Epiphany. That's the day we're supposed to celebrate. But honestly, I felt the need to celebrate Epiphany with you all, and it was an excuse to keep these screens up one more week, as dry as they are. It's still worth it. Because we have so much tradition around the Magi. Sometimes we refer to them as Wiesner, sometimes as kings, specifically three kings. But it is clear that we Episcopalians always have that celebration of the end of Christmas and the beginning of Epiphany. And sometimes those lines sort of blur. And that was true in the early church and throughout history in the traditions of Eastern and Western Church. But all I know for certain is I want to be able to do two things. And one of them is move my three kings around the place. Notice that our three kings have finally made it to Jesus. They were over here for the first few weeks of Christmas, and they're finally up there. And it just broke my heart to think of the idea of them never making it or nobody witnessing it. Now, the other tradition we're not doing today, and Charles is tempted with real faith by not having us sing We Three Kings. I can imagine that some of you are going to like, we want our swaying songs, right? Oh. And Charles is like, oh, please, Kurt, don't do that. He's not heard it already. He heard my sermon already, and he didn't know I was going to do this part. So, point being is, the Magi draw our attention in this story because they are different from all the other characters in the stories. The other stories of shepherds and so on and so forth, none as enchanting quite as the Magi are. Following stars, whether they were scientists or just simply observers of the sky, they see God doing something. And they seek the knowledge of what is happening. And yeah, maybe they looked through scriptures and said, this is a foretold sort of thing. And maybe they just were curious. But they journeyed afar, and they came to Jerusalem in Matthew's story, and went to the obvious place to find a newborn king. They, of course, went to the palace. And I'm sure they were shocked, just as much as King Herod was shocked, to find that there was no newborn king. And Herod was afraid. Now I'll focus on Herod a little bit, but the Magi continue their journey. They say, we're still going forward. Do you have any clue where we might go? And the scribes look at the text, and they also say it's to Bethlehem they go. And they hear from Herod, go and let me know after you find him so that I can go as well. And that becomes my favorite moment of the story. They continue their journey. They go to this small town in the middle of nowhere, no way thinking that a king should be there. And the star stops. And there is this moment. When they saw the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. Their journey is complete, and yet they haven't experienced what they came for. But it's in that moment, the moment before, where they experience that joy, that hope in whatever new is to come from this moment. And I have to believe before knocking on that door of that house They took a deep breath, and they looked up at the night sky, and they gave thanks for that journey, even with the unexpected parts. Now, the text doesn't tell us if they are happy just to find a couple and a baby in an undescript house. But they still kneel down. They offer their gifts. Now, a word about their gifts. You can probably see all the parallels that are in the book of Isaiah that Matthew used for the details of the story. Arise, shine, for your light has come. And at the end, they shall bring gold and frankincense and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. But I know some of you are saying, where's the myrrh? What's that about? Well, I think Matthew added the myrrh and did so because Matthew knows the whole story of Jesus of Nazareth. You see, frankincense and gold were the gifts of royalty. They were what we gave to fellow monarchs, but not so much myrrh, because myrrh was the symbol and part of the ritual of death. But again, Matthew knows that Jesus' story is only complete in crucifixion and resurrection. And to point to that reality, there are 3 gifts rather than the 2 from the book of Isaiah. And then there's one last moment. They get warned in a dream. Now, in the Hebrew Scriptures, that's how God tells people about what's coming next. Always in dreams. It's how Joseph decided to stay with Mary to begin with. And in a dream, they are told not to go back to her. Instead, left for their own country by another road. Now, honestly, I read a little more into this metaphor because they go home differently. They did not experience exactly what they thought that they would. But I believe that they were profoundly changed by the experience. We know nothing of what happens next to them, other than they start the journey home. Now, I want to deviate for a moment and to share with you a couple things that I want you to do. One is that on January 6th, at the Episcopal Church of Epiphany in Washington, D.C., our presiding bishop, Michael Curry, preached a sermon to the whole church, looking to reclaim Epiphany in the wake of what happened 1 year ago in this country on January 6th. Now, I have Bishop Curry's text. I can read it to you, but you need to see it. Because when Bishop Curry preaches, I mean, he preaches. And he preached, let me tell you. He didn't even preach throughout his technical difficulties, where it was really hard to hear. So I'm glad to tell you that they have remastered the sermon, so you can actually see it in its entirety. If you can't find it on the web, I will link it in our Tuesday newsletter, so you'll be able to see it then. But I really, really need you to listen to it and to experience it in its whole. Bishop Curry also issued an essay for the church. And copies of it were either handed out to you. I know Anne was trying to get them into your hands, but they're also in the back of the church and the front of the church. And I want you to take that home with you. But I want to highlight a few things from it. Bishop Curry wrote, "It is not an exaggeration to say that we are living in a moral moment of spiritual peril and promise. Such a moment demands moral vision that sees beyond mere self-interest and beholds the common good. A spiritual strength stronger than any sword." In the essay, he suggests that there is a need to do do three things as Episcopalians, maybe even as Americans, but we'll focus on Episcopalians. He asks us to, one, renew our relationship with God. Number two, revive our relationship with each other. And number three, resurrect our commitment to the ideals we share. And again, he goes into detail on some of this, but it's only a 4-page essay, so I'm going to let you read it on your own. But I want to share from the pulpit his conclusion, because I think it is critical to our well-being and going forward. Bishop Curry wrote, "We don't think of it this way very often, but unselfish, sacrificial love for each other may well be the supreme value on which democracy depends. On the great seal of the United States, above the bald eagle, are banners on which the Latin words E pluribus unum are written. These words mean, from many, one nation from many diverse people. But do you know where the words come from? They come from the writings of Cicero, who lived during the time of the Roman Republic. Cicero said, when each person loves the other as much as himself, it makes one out of many. In other words, when each person loves the other as much as he loves himself, it makes one out of many possible. That's what Cicero wrote about democracy. Moses and Jesus identified love as the supreme law of God for life. This is indeed a moment of both peril and promise. But if love is indeed the supreme law of God for life, as I believe it is, then God's way of unselfish, sacrificial love for each other could well be the key to the life of a nation and the world itself. That way of love could well be the key to our truly becoming one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Therein is the promise. Now, the challenge with all this is the fear and exhaustion that so many of us are facing. And now I wish to go back to the text and to the other two main characters found in this story of Matthew. Two men that are vastly different from one another. This is a short essay written by Nadia Bolz-Weber, the Lutheran pastor. And she wrote it a year ago, but it's just now gone public beyond her subscriptions from a year ago. An epiphany story of two masculinities. A story of two men. Herod, who is the ruler on a throne of power, and Joseph, who is a peasant in an unconventional marriage. One man is powerful, one man is not. And yet the text only describes one of these men as being afraid. And it wasn't the peasant. Matthew's Gospel tells us that King Herod made the Magi tell him where his baby was because he was frightened of a baby, threatened by a horoscope and a newborn. And this fear that his position in life is so tenuous that it must be fortified by sacrificing whoever it takes is not theoretical, by the way. This Herod guy literally killed two of his own sons because he felt threatened by them, his own sons. Fear that what he had could be taken away, or fear of not getting what he wanted, turned him into a monster. So much so that when he can't quite locate the right baby, the one that is so threatening to him, he just sends for all the children to and under in and around Bethlehem to be killed. Take that in. This is what fear does. Fear disguises itself in so many ways as greed, hate, isolation, addiction. The list is endless. But in the end, fear is the root of it all. And while you and I might not be murderous tyrants, none of us are free from the effects of fear in our lives. It keeps us isolated and small, and it steals away joy and possibility. But in Joseph, we see a different kind of man than Herod. Joseph was not afraid. An angel came from God and spoke love, was love, embodied love, sought to protect love like a divine can of compressed air, and this cast out Joseph's fear so that he could function the way he was intended to. And here's one clue, one way we can know that Joseph wasn't afraid. We did it bat an eye when the angel said that his baby and his wife weren't safe, so he should take his family to Egypt. Egypt, the place where his ancestors were enslaved. The place that God rescued his people from slavery. But with fear cast out, Joseph was able to believe it possible that God's redemptive work can happen anywhere, even in Egypt. When fear cast out, Joseph no longer had to see everything through the lens of what was in his past. With fear cast out, he was able to be a king, protect his wife and child, and preserve that which is good in the face of tyranny. Herod's fear caused death. Joseph's fearlessness protected life. Of course, the irony is that Herod feared this baby for all the wrong reasons. The Christ child did not knock Herod off his pathetic little throne. History took care of that. Jesus of Nazareth did not overthrow Rome. He laughed at Rome. He saw Rome for what it was. Temporary. Fleeting. Harsh and demanding, tyrannical, yes, but temporary. And this child, protected by the songs of the angels in the heart of his mother and the fearlessness of his father, came to free people. Free us from the shackles of sin and fear. Gospel people are free people. And free people are dangerous people. Free people are not ruled by fear. Free people see Rome for what it is. And do you know what? Nadia concludes. There are angels hovering around us, good people of God. There are messengers of love all around. And again, and forever they say, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. For in the heart of God there is enough love to cast out fear. Herod's